Eat more plants than animals. That's the summary conclusion from a study that was just recently published in a journal called the Journal of the American Heart Association. And just a few days ago, this information was published, so this is fresh off the press. So I wanted to share this information with you. What researchers did is they reviewed information on diet, sort of dietary food intake, in a database from 1987 to 2016 of middle-aged US adults. And they compiled the data, they kind of broke the diets into different groups and different percentages, and then they looked at their risk factor. They looked at people who at the beginning of the observational data had no diagnosis of heart disease, and then they looked over that period of time who got heart disease. And here's what it showed, is that people who ate the most amount of plant-based foods had a 16% decrease risk factor for developing cardiovascular disease. And then to make the point even stronger, the people who ate the most amount of plant-based foods had a 32% decreased risk factor of dying from cardiovascular disease. And then they also looked at non-cardiovascular risk factor for death. So basically the statistic goes that there's a 25% reduction of dying from any cause compared to a group of people that had the lowest amount of plant food intake. And so this is on over 10,000 people. So it's a good sort of data size in that regard. And typically when it has a higher amount of subjects that are being evaluated, we kind of trust the results a little bit more. And the Journal of the American Heart Association is a reputable journal. So this is interesting information. And while I'm not one to say that animal-based proteins are bad for you, I eat animal-based proteins regularly. I recommend them to patients. But there's a big difference in what the standard American diet contains for animal-based protein and what I recommend. A lot of the feedlot beef is loaded with fat that's generated from eating corn and grains that cattle are not made to eat. I recommend only having 100% grass-fed cattle, which definitely changes the fat profile. That and just inflammation and just other sustainably raised animal proteins are better than the kind of conventionally raised, non-sustainable and kind of harsh environments and things like that. I think all that stuff matters, but I do absolutely agree that people in the U.S. particularly are absolutely not consuming enough plant-based foods. And I've done lots of biochemistry evaluations on people who are vegetarian, and it's one of those things where you can do it right and you can do it wrong, because bread and pasta and refined grains, all that's vegetarian. It's not animal protein, but it's definitely not healthy for you. And then I've done blood chemistries on vegetarians who were doing it right, eating lots of plant-based foods, way more than average, and their blood chemistry looked like somebody who was 10, 50 years younger than they actually were, and they show the same kind of clinical evaluation in their general sort of health and fitness. And so there's definitely something to it. This is an observational study that was just published, and so we don't really have information on causation, like what is it about plant-based foods that lead to this significant reduced risk factor of not only cardiovascular disease, but 25% lower chance of all-cause mortality compared to the lower consumption of plant-based foods. So it's really significant, important finding. It's something that's probably not surprising to a lot of people, but yet people still aren't consuming the amount of plant-based foods that they should, even though studies like this, have come out many times. There's still kind of a loss of sort of integration of this information into people's diets, which is one of the reasons why I have sponsored of the show right now, New Greens. New Greens is a plant-based greens supplement. There's lots of different produce and vegetables, and there's different types. I really wasn't trying to have this sort of pitch in this particular episode, but it just brings it full circle to the idea that there's other ways that you can consume plant-based foods. Obviously, ideally, the best way is to get it in a meal where you're preparing and eating good, high-quality vegetables and other produce. But on days where that's not happening, New Greens is an excellent source, and it's one of the only ones that you're going to find on the market, the only one that I actually know about, that is a whole food-based greens product, as opposed to a lot of the greens that are out there. They're juiced, so you just have the juice, and then they dehydrate it with high heat. New Greens have sprouted and freeze-dried, which maintains the produce as if you're eating it in the raw form, which is why with third-party validation, New Greens can actually claim a certain amount of actually vegetable servings as if you ate it by taking the supplement. You can mix it up and just drink it in water, and there's other ways that we're going to talk about, ways that you can get this into your diet, because it's such a great way to just increase your overall servings of plant-based foods, because people are just not getting enough of it. And it's something that, as this study showed that just was released days ago, it's so key for decreasing the risk factors of the #1 killer in the US, cardiovascular disease. And so a little food for thought. Hopefully this information brings some insight and helps you to take some action steps. So until then, keep it real.